1972 Warwick Farm International meeting will be the series production touring car race, the second round of the South Pacific Touring Car Series. This will be over 34 laps of the circuit, a total of 76.5 miles, and it's going to be a very intense battle between the Holden Toranas XU1, car 36 on the front line of the grid, that's Colin Bond, Doug Chivas in the Chrysler Charger next to him on the front line. Then on the second line, on the inside, Alan Moffat, the Ford GTHO, and on his outside, car 37, Peter Brock in the XU1. So with these four drivers and other drivers in the field, it's going to be a battle royal between these three makes of series production cars, the Chrysler Chargers, the Holden XU1s, and the Ford GTHOs.
Well, you can see that Colin Bond's got the jump in one of the new XU1s, and thrusting up from the second row of the grid into second place is a very determined Alan Moffat. He's already displaced the white Charger of Doug Chivers, and down the straight I'd say we might see the V8 power starting to perhaps make some impression on the little green Torana. And there's Bond tucked over on the gate shutters line on the inside, Moffat ranging up on the outside and having to brake much sooner, it would appear. Bond asserting his lead as they whistle down into creek for the first time.
While this is occurring, we might mention that in the first round of the series touring car series in Brisbane, Leo Gagan won the race after Alan Moffat had the lead with and quite a handy lead too, with a lap to go before he blew a tyre on the last lap, and so Leo Gagan was able to win the first round in the Chrysler Charger. But at the moment, where we can see Colin Bond in the Holden Toranas XU1 out in front of Alan Moffat, who drew the second line of the grid but very quickly got along on the inside to take up second spot. Warwick Farm, we're moving along now to the causeway, which is the bridge between the two watering lakes here, and we see that the Torana driver has a handy lead over Moffat, with Chivas in the Chrysler in third place.
Yes, well, through the twisty section you can see that Chivas has managed to stay with Moffat, but Bond has managed to get somewhat clear.
That's a very interesting point, because it would seem to most people that the more powerful cars would have the greater advantage, but that's not necessarily so. If we look at the lap record times for this class of vehicle, the lap record for a series production car with a capacity of in excess of 5,000 cc's is held by Fred Gibson in a Ford GTHO, a time of 1:48.8. However, the outright lap record for this class of car is 1:48.2, and that's held by Colin Bond, who we see leading the field here in the Torana XU1. So the smaller Torana, with a smaller engine capacity and therefore a less power output, has a better time over the circuit than the larger engine Ford.
Well, you can chuck a Torana around, and at the Warwick Farm circuit you need to be able to do this. There's a lot of multiple cornering sections like the S's here. Bond is having a relatively easy time. Not that it's easy, but compared to Alan Moffat's ride, he's somewhat an advantage here. Moffat, you can see, is clipping apexes, really driving the car very hard to try to stay with Bond.
We just had the first lap positions come through. Colin Bond, as we see, leading Alan Moffat, with Doug Chivers in third place in the Chrysler. In fourth place, car 33, Leo Gagan, also in a Valiant Charger. Then followed by Peter Brock in the XU1, and in sixth place, Alan Moffat off the course, but back onto the circuit now. And in sixth place, John Goss in a GTHO.
Third place, Doug Chivers, highest place in the Chargers, doing a very nice job of pointing the car around the many corners at Warwick Farm. These Chargers are a magic thing in a straight line, make a magnificent six-cylinder noise, but they're not the happy tail-out kind of car that a GTHO is or that a Torana is, and you'll find that Chivers is working pretty hard to make the beast change direction.
Graham, these Chargers are fitted with only a 3-speed gearbox, whereas the GTHOs and Toranas have a 4-speed forward box. Now, does that mean that because of the less variation in acceleration and deceleration, that these cars would not be as well suited to this track as the others?
The gearing of the Chrysler with only 3 gears is explained by Chrysler as the fact that their gearbox has only second, third and top. It has a very tall first gear, and in fact this can be quite useful. A long first gear can take you, say, up to I'd say in the case of a Charger, up to about 55, 60 miles an hour in first gear. Very useful for getting off the line, because it means that you can just hang on to first gear for a long time, and you may be able to shake people off at the start of the race.
One of the several Toranas in the team, Peter Brock, Colin Bond in the Holden Dillard team, Torana. There are actually 4 of the Holden Dillard team Toranas in this particular race. That's one of them. Car 37 is in 5th place. Never mind Colin Bond going easily in front. Alan Moffat in 2nd place. Doug Chivers in 3rd place in the Charger. But look at Bond streaking to the bottom of Hume Straight. This is where he really starts to accelerate. In fact, he's being chased by Moffat now as Moffat comes up Hume Straight behind him. And there's Bond braking very tightly for Creek Corner. Slows down to about 30, 35 miles an hour as he goes through the entire 180-degree turn. Under Shell Bridge and into the northern crossing, where the speed will get up to about 80, 95 miles an hour. Into the northern crossing, first car, followed by the second car in Moffat and Chivers. And then
in 4th place there is the second of the dealer team cars. That's the Victorian Peter Brock.
So no change in the order after the first 4 laps. Bond leading from Moffat, Chivers and Brock. For this class of race is 1:48.2, held by Colin Bond in the XU1, but that is the outright time and also the time for cars in his particular class. However, the larger cars, which are over 5 litres in capacity, the record stands at 1:48.8, held by Fred Gibson. And we've just had word that Alan Moffat has broken that record for the cars over 5 litres. Gibson's time 1:48.8, and on the 3rd lap Alan Moffat 1:48.5, so that is a new lap record for the size of car, 1:48.5. Alan Moffat on the 3rd lap breaking the lap record for this class.
Well, it doesn't quite surprise me, Alan. He was working pretty hard in those early laps. He seems to have, as a matter of fact, steadied up a little since then. He's giving himself anything up to 3 inches clearance on the fences now, and tending to stay on the road across the apexes and on the exits as well.
And that must have been a very hot lap, that 3rd lap, Graham, because another record in Peter Brock, setting a new time for cars in his class. Peter Brock's time 1:48, which bettered Colin Bond's time of 1:48.2. So we have 2 new outright lap records for this class for the cars over 5 litres and those under it.
Yes, of course, this is something that in a way surprises me, because this is going to be a very long hour for these people. Warwick Farm is almost incessantly a change direction course. There's only one major straight, and one would think that a little bit of conservation in the early stages could be well repaid. for this reason, I think it's interesting to remember that we've got Chargers placed 3rd and 5th at this stage, and the race is not necessarily to the swiftest at the start, but that's Peter Brock in with, obviously with tyre trouble, and that takes the pressure off Chivers, and virtually writes off Peter Brock's chances, I'm afraid, because the time taken for a wheel change is going to be very difficult to regain.
Yes, Graham, they were on the 12th lap, which means that another 23 laps remained. So it would mean a tremendous performance on the part of Peter Brock to pick up the lost ground that he's lost by coming into the pits. Still no change of order apart from the absence of Peter Brock now, with Bond leading from Moffat. But Brock is very quickly out of the pit, so that was good pit service indeed. But no doubt he'll join the field some laps behind. Still with Colin Bond. Around at the causeway fence and went out very wide that time, but gets a nice line coming through with the left front wheel coming right up off the ground as he cornered. Time again with Brock Bond at least completing that lap. We had him lapped at 1:48.2, and that is equal to the old record that he established in winning the race last year, 1:48.2. Although that time has been bettered today with a time of 1:48 by Peter Brock before he went into the pits. Well, here's the change of fortune that Alan Moffat may have been banking on. Colin Bond slowed on the approach to the causeway, and he too, like his teammate Peter Brock, has either blown an outside tyre or broken outside front wheel. And Moffat, with an enormous cheer from the grandstand, goes through into the lead. Bond, you'll notice, despite his wheel trouble, isn't backing off very much in sprinting back to the pits for repairs. A bit of a puzzle because this is the relatively lightly used left-hand front wheel of the Torana, which is causing the problem here. And now the Holden dealer team pit crew with their compressed air guns for tightening up the wheel nuts are back in action. The car's lowered from its quick lift jacks, and I'd say Bond will be back in the race with a loss of about 30 seconds. But this is a complete change of fortune now for the Holden dealer team. Both its drivers have been delayed well back, and striding off in front is Alan Moffat. Alan Moffat with about 8 laps to go to complete what looks like a certain victory for him, provided nothing, of course, goes wrong with his machine. Earlier in the race, we would, of course, said that it was a certain victory for Colin Bond, but in the world of motor racing, nothing is certain, and as we saw, Colin Bond lost valuable time with wheel trouble and had to pull into the pits, which meant that all chance he had of winning the race was lost. So certainly anything can happen in the sport of motor racing, and Alan Moffat is hoping, quite honestly, that it won't.
Colin Bond appears to have managed to restart his motor car, and he's back in the race.
Alan Moffat on the tail of one of the Chargers driven by Mark Chenery. And let's watch Moffat here as he's going to try everything to get past this Charger, which has almost as much power as the car being driven by Alan Moffat. So this could be interesting. Well, let's just watch the expertise of Alan Moffat and see just how he tries to get past the Charger. Well, Chenery not giving her any ground. He's keeping to the inside all the time and preventing him from coming through.
Alan, you do realise that Moffat has now put himself in a Charger sandwich, and the Chargers have in the past driven in formation under certain circumstances, and I think Moffat's going to find Chenery a little wider than the average Charger, if you know what I mean.
Well, as you mentioned before, obviously the Holden dealer team had race tactics worked out, but those tactics went astray when the two Holden Toranas had to drop out of the race and lose ground. But the Chargers are still in it, and while they're together, they obviously try some team tactics, but to no avail, with Moffat slipping through nicely as he comes into pit straight. Chenery trying his hardest now to get past the GTHO. And this could be interesting to watch them as they come up around Homestead Corner and into Hume Straight. Let's just see what the difference is between these two cars. Now Chenery pulling out, trying to out-accelerate the GTHO, but he hasn't got the power under his bonnet, and Moffat slips away quite easily up the long half-mile straight. On the 28th lap, Moffat still leading in his GTHO from Chivers in the Charger, Gagan in 3rd place in the Charger, Holland in 4th place in the XU1, Goss is in 5th place in the Charger, and Tony Paul of Queensland has moved up into 6th place, also driving a Charger.
It looks at this stage as though Moffat is definitely slowing down, and you'll see Doug Chivers coming up now, passing teammate Martin Chenery, or fellow Charger driver anyway, Martin Chenery, and I would hope that Chenery makes it a little easier for Chivers to get past than it turned out for Alan Moffat. Well, this is building up into a most interesting situation because Moffat is visibly slowing, and Chivers must be getting very close to him now, sweeping into Ledger, and yes, Moffat's visibly slow here. He's going very gently, almost tiptoe, not along the straights, but around the corners, and I think he's trying his hardest to conserve his tyres at this stage. He'll get away from Chivers probably. On second thought, I don't think he will, because Hume Straight is critical in that you've got to come out of Homestead properly. And if he wants to save his rubber and go through Homestead gently, then he'll be slower down the straight. And Chivers at least is in a position now to try to slipstream him down the straight. But it's obviously not on. The GTHO has got a lot more power. But the race is by no means over yet.
And we must again remind everybody of the situation in Queensland last week, where Moffat had the lead with a lap to go and he was still beaten, with his car suffering tyre damage, and Leo Gagan able to slip through and take the lead. And look at the situation developing here again today. Only 4 laps to go. About 4 laps to go, and Moffat just holding the lead ahead of Doug Chivers in the Charger.
It's a terrible position for Moffat to find himself in. He knows he's got to go hard, and yet he knows that if he goes hard, there must be must be some reason for him to have slowed down, you see. So he must be trying to save the motor car for one reason or another. Chivers is a very fair player. There, Moffat's let him through, I reckon. Yes, Moffat's conceded the point, decided to finish second rather than not finish at all, and the Warwick Farm grandstands go berserk.
It's probably a little bit far away from our commentary position here to have heard the noise over the microphones, but there was quite a loud cheer from the huge grandstand here, and there's the other Charger slips through. Chenery now has passed Moffat. A very large crowd in the grandstand here, and they've been cheering all the time at every opportunity. But as soon as they saw the Charger of Chivers go through inside Moffat, they really applauded. As you can see now, they're watching the action with a great deal of interest, as are those who are closer to the pits and closer to the line of the fences right around the circuit. With only a couple of laps remaining, Chivers now in the lead, leads from Moffat. Gagan is in third place. Gagan is now just going out of the pit straight, around into the paddock bend. This is Chivers, the leader, one of the white Chargers. Gagan also has a white Charger, and between the two white Chargers is Moffat in the GTHO. Moffat now is coming very slowly around the corner.
Well, that was the ever-present risk, and it's finally arrived for Alan Moffat, and it seems now that we'll at least get Leo Gagan past him and possibly Don Holland up into third place as well. A gallant try by Alan Moffat.
Now Moffat being passed by one of the slower cars, but that car is some distance behind the leaders. Moffat still at the moment is in second place, and very shortly we should see some of the Chargers come past him. Doug Chivers has gone past the finishing line, and he is on his third last lap. We'll stay with Moffat as he comes very closely around the causeway, and we should see these cars. That was another lap car going past him. We should see Leo Gagan in car 33 come past him very soon as he approaches the causeway.
Moffat's actually now faced with the problem whether he'll have a tyre left at all by the time he gets to the pits. But with 2 odd laps remaining, there's possibly time for Moffat to make a very swift pit stop and get out again.
Now Gagan has moved up into second place by virtue of the fact that Moffat, when he comes into the pits, will have to pull in and have that wheel repaired. So it's the 2 white Chargers in front. Doug Chivers leading from Leo Gagan, but the margin is almost a complete lap. So it shows you how the pace of this race is told, with first the XU1s and now the GTHOs being forced to leave the race and leaving it open to the Chargers, which haven't been completing the circuit in such quick time, but have been lapping quite consistently and with less wear obviously on the vehicles. So as Gagan now comes around to complete his 31st lap, we'll find Doug Chivers for you shortly, and Chivers has 2 laps remaining, and it will remain to be seen as whether he can complete those 2 laps safely, with Alan Moffat now coming into the pits. Now there's Doug Chivers going down his outside.
Alan, what I think Moffat's decided to do here is in fact not make a pit stop, but wait for the checkered flag and drive across then. Because you see he's on the... he's in a very tricky position here, because if he stops his motor car in the present position, I'm sure he'll be asked to remove it by officials. Whereas crawling along, he hopes to be able to spin out the remainder of the race just long enough to enable him to inch over the line with his blown back tyre.
Moffat is only about 15 yards from the finishing line, and Chivers is still right round the back of the course as he's coming around now the northern crossing to go into the causeway. So we'll stay with Chivers. Moffat getting very close to the line. He's still not very far short of it and inching forward all the time. and a crew of cameramen in there waiting as Moffat inches towards the line. Chivers is still coming around the back of the course. He's now on the polo corner. A look at the stand, and no flag out, so there is 1 lap remaining for Chivers. So I think that Moffat may well have miscalculated here, Graham. Chivers into pit straight. And there is the checkered flag. Yes, that is the last lap. Alan Moffat crawls across the line, so a calculation there of the number of laps lost by Moffat. But Doug Chivers the winner, and we'll confirm the placings for you shortly, with minor placings to be filled by Leo Gagan and Alan Moffat. But it looks as though Alan Moffat has miscalculated the laps indeed, because he is a lap behind the place getters, and the official placings are first Doug Chivers in the Charger, second Leo Gagan in the Charger, and third Don Holland in the Holden Toranas XU1. Chivers' time for the 34 laps, 62 minutes, 27.1 seconds.